This week, we're standing strong on the front lines, talking no new leases in New Orleans, no new permits in Oregon, shutting down a drone Air Force base, and playing whack-a-mole with Monsanto. Then, from the front lines to the halls of international law, Polly Higgins lays out the parameters of Ecocide law and how global change starts with a simple concept. But first, a bit of a spring inspired me to write this. Behind identical diamonds, this beauty stands. The links in the fence, a crisscross attempt, like a modern art take, a familiar yes natural grace, now remade. The cuts in the grass down below, a throwaway wound in this planned out display that make up a tense play between art and admirer, private property and sidewalk. Cherry blossoms toss, the smell of sweet spring, a gentle reprieve from wherever you've been and wherever you're now headed. Captivated by her captivity, I stand in front of this seemingly boring scene, watching the sun strum through these branches like symphonic glances. The music is windy and light. The delicate flowers speak of a power that's whispered, not screamed. A cycle that moves in spite of our grooves, though much we will do to stop it. But these flowers care not if we stop for a while, stretch out a smile. They are not just here for us. This tree may be planted to show off this land that we have decided is nice. But whose vice is vanity if we place demandingly beautiful beings to make us look good? Would that we could lay down the mirror and see that our error is looking for us in a world that cares less. We seek in reflections a false flag redemption, the hope that we may stay and remain the masters of what we now slay. Look away. Narcissistic conventions, despite good intentions, will only lead us astray, if I may. The eternal summer of our time shall fade. You could say we're standing at twilight, an abyss of our own mess, and try as we might, it's too late. I'd rather think that there's something to do. I hate to be useless, don't you? Yes, the water is rising and I'm building bridges between sinking islands, and then in my free time, learning to swim. I'm dancing with gloom, flirting with doom, but with this clear view, I can see the choking sky. I can see the forest that used to be, hear the trees speaking along with the breeze. I can pause. By a blooming reminder to think and act kinder, a small simple scene of beauty that's realized and really then seen. I can see why that fence makes us tense in this iteration in so many nations that think we'll keep something in or out. I'm making connections between us and them. I'm drawing the ties that bind us to life. I'm telling you why the why bother line is bullshit. I'm telling you why this is so worth the fight. That caged beauty that gave me this cue, see, that's you and me. It's civil war, this is self-hate. The stardust and what we destroy is in us, the destroyers. This is ecocide, genocide, homicide, suicide. This is madness. I'd rather build bridges than slit my own wrists in a doomsday abyss, shrug and think this is just how it is. I'd rather look past Narcissus's glass than stare at myself as we burn. I'd rather see beauty and think maybe we could make it last a little longer. Maybe we could step back from this impending fall and enjoy a spring, perhaps a summer, a lingering beauty uncaged, by us no longer scathed. We will someday be but stardust and echoed remains that play out to space the whims and the folly of all that we made. The beauty now caged will stretch out an expanse through sunlight and sway. We will be nothing. We will do nothing. For eternity. With so long to do nothing, why not do something now? From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your windy tipping point. From drones to superdomes to calendars and congratulations, let's head straight to the front lines for the latest in activist news and upcomings. First off, today in New Orleans, you may recall the Superdome as the quote-unquote evacuation of last resort during Hurricane Katrina, where thousands of people sought refuge from the literal perfect storm of climate change, and we'll get to that later infrastructure plan. Well, today it is the site of yet another "fuck you, New Orleans" get-together, featuring the auctioning off of more than 40 million acres of the Gulf of Mexico to the highest bidders from the oil and gas industries. In protest, the group No New Leases has planned, in true Abby Hoffman style, to surround the Superdome and call for an end to new fossil fuel leases and a focus on renewable energy sources like wind and solar, which on a day like today would be great. Now, this sounds like a tall order anywhere, but in Louisiana, it's way taller. A 2011 study found that oil and gas companies in Louisiana took in 11.6% of the state's total earnings, around $20 billion, making Louisiana's GDP higher than 86 out of 185 countries ranked by the World Bank in 2012. Yeah, that's a lot of jobs and a lot of money. But consider this. Last year, Don Briggs, head of Louisiana Oil and Gas, spoke at the Baton Rouge Press Club, reporting on the industry's downward spiral. It's not a pretty picture. It's probably going to get a lot worse before it gets better. What this translates to is job loss. And in December of last year, Louisiana's economy was reeling from this not-so-pretty picture. And in that same speech in Baton Rouge, Briggs laid out the Louisiana lows that were causing these cuts, including about a 38% cut in oil and natural gas drilling sites between 2014 and 2015. A more than 50% cut in drilling permits, and the plain and simple truth that rig activity in South Louisiana has been in a steady decline for the last 14 years. Now, this points to a hell of a lot of hard work from the activist community, but it also just points to inevitable change. In a 2015 article on the death of fossil fuels, Paul Gilding writes, "It is now becoming clear that we've reached a tipping point where fossil fuels will enter terminal decline, independently of climate policy action. The key drivers are competing energy products of renewables and batteries, in a system with electric vehicles, will behave as a disruptive technology always does, delivering ever lower prices and ever higher quality in a decades-long period of innovation and deployment, which fossil fuels can't match. This will form a powerful economic force both driving disruption and advocating climate action, undermining the historically dominant political and economic resistance of the fossil fuel companies." In other words, fossil fuels just aren't economically feasible anymore. Think about it. Shell spent millions just trying to get up to the fucking Arctic to drill, only to find that it didn't make any economic sense. The whole advent of fracking came about because we had to get to oil and gas that wasn't easy to get to. We'd already tapped the easy-to-get-to resources. The huge, clunky, dirty, and expensive machine that is the fossil fuel industry is beginning to clash with its best bud capitalism. And as this clash occurs, the industry will do all that it can to hold on to revenue and relevance, which of course means auctions like the one happening today in New Orleans. It means more bribes to people like Clinton, and it means that we can't hope that the economy and the bought-off politicians kill this industry on their own. Activism has pushed what Gilding calls a dying industry closer to the coffin, and we have to keep pushing. Indeed, we have to ramp up our fight against fossil fuels because we don't have the luxury of time. They're fighting back harder, and we need to stand up not only for green energy, but for the jobs they'll create. We have to counter that favorite line from these toxic minds that like to threaten our economies with revenue and job loss, pointing their sludge-covered fingers at healthcare, education, and saying, "You're going to have to make cuts to those if we go under." No. Fuck you. You go the fuck away, and we might actually need less money for healthcare. Furthermore, the amount of revenue to be made from a green energy-centric system, plus single-payer healthcare, plus free higher education, totally dwarfs anything that can be made from opening up more than 40 million acres of water to environmental devastation. So, if you can't be in New Orleans today, show support online with the 2 hashtags below. You can also visit nonewleases.org and sign the petition calling for no new leases in the Gulf of Mexico. We will share a link to that petition on our Facebook page as well. Now, looking ahead to this weekend, starting on Sunday, activists will head to bumfuck Nevada in order to, for the second year in a row, shut down Creech Air Force Base, the first U.S. base in the country to carry out illegal, remotely controlled assassinations using the MQ-1 Predator drones. And that was way back in 2005. Since 2009, dozens of activists have been arrested yearly for trespassing on the base while protesting drone strikes. Last year, more than 150 activists joined up to protest at the base, including more than 50 veterans. Protesters successfully disrupted the base, bringing work to a halt for almost an hour, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but consider how many drone bombings might have happened in that hour. And if you also consider that 90% of victims killed by drones are innocent, I say that an hour is pretty damn significant. And this year, they're headed back and intend on occupying the space between this coming Sunday, the 27th, and the following Saturday, April 2nd. If you can't make it to that desolate space outside of Vegas, support online with the hashtag #ShutDownCreech and join the fight through visiting the Shut Down Creech website at shutdowncreech.blogspot.com. You can also check out the organizations that make up the Shut Down Creech Coalition, which are Code Pink, Veterans for Peace, Nevada Desert Experience, and Voices for Creative Nonviolence. We will put links to those orgs at the end of the show and in the description. And don't forget, you can always. And a little tidbit here, for frontline events in LA, be sure to bookmark this page, losangelespeoplesmedia.org.wordpress.com. A bit of a mouthful, but worth the extra typing. Here you can find a calendar of events for the LA area, and of course, you can submit your own. Finally, before we move on to our awesome interview this week, let me wrap up the Frontlines update with some good news. Last week, the DARK Act, aka the Why the Fuck Do You Care What's in Your Food Act, aka the Pro-Monsanto Act, died in the Senate when it failed to win the 60 votes necessary to move the cloture forward. A cloture, in case you're wondering, is the break of a filibuster. So, as of now, the bill will not advance. But, as you know, if you've followed this storyline before, chances are it'll come back up again, just like it did this time. Like a zombie jack-in-the-box. And I'm sure there's some joke in there about rotting flesh and jack-in-the-box food, but I'm no comedian, so we'll just move on. It is absolutely vital that we not take this as a sign to sit back, relax, and sip on some organic tea. Keep the pressure on, because that's the only thing that has kept this zombie bill at bay thus far. Besides getting on board with the Right to Know movement and anti-GMO organizations, check out this list to see who to thank and who to spank, as GMO Free USA puts it. So please do pause the video and take a nice long look at this list, because for now, we're moving straight on to the next dose of good news. And this one is so incredibly well-deserved. If you've watched the show for a while, you have heard me mention BXE, Beyond Extreme Energy. This environmental group has been targeting FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, for a long, long time. Basically, the reasoning is FERC has a nasty habit of greenlighting big oil and gas projects despite the tremendous environmental shitstorm that they cause. BXE has done everything from disrupt monthly meetings to blocking FERC entrances to holding an almost 3-week-long fast outside the building in the name of people and planet over profit. And now they can celebrate a very, very hard-won victory in this ongoing battle. On March 11th, FERC denied a permit for a fracked gas export terminal and a pipeline extension in Oregon. BXE member Ted Glick had this to say about the announcement. "We hope this decision is the beginning of a change of heart and policy by FERC commissioners. But we're not holding our breath. The rebellion against FERC is one aimed at radically transforming how energy is produced, transported, and consumed in this country. The health of communities and the planet depends on making energy generation and distribution locally sourced, democratically controlled, and greenhouse gas free." For more on this ongoing fight, visit beyondextremeenergy.org, where you'll also find information on the fight against fossil fuels in North Carolina, Maryland, New York, Seattle, and beyond. Now, not so much moving on and staying in the realm of environmental activism, let me introduce you to our guest for this week. Polly Higgins is the leading voice behind Ecocide law. Ecocide being crimes against the earth, including people, animals, and what we consider to be inanimate objects like forests, lakes, mountains, etc. As she writes on her website, simply put, destroying the earth is a crime, as is state failure to assist those who are faced with displacement due to climate change. Higgins used to be a practicing barrister, aka lawyer, in London and now advocates for this missing law. We spoke with her last week about her work, the parameters of ecocide, and how international change comes from the singular principle of do no harm. Take a look.
I've proposed into the United Nations that we criminalize mass damage and destruction, in essence. I've given legal definition to that. In essence, if you ask the questions, why is it that we're still continuing with fossil fuels, even though we know the evidence is there, that it's causing significant harm? The answer is because it's not a crime. So there's missing law here. And it's really about filling that gap and recognizing that what it comes down to is creating an overriding superior law that it puts in place a legal duty of care. And there's a hierarchy of law, if you like. And at the very top, if you imagine like a triangle, at the very top of all law sits international criminal law. So genocide, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression, all these laws supersede every other law that we have. It's about addressing missing state crime and corporate crime, and those who make the decisions at the very top end. They're the ones that this is specifically targeted to. Those who are carrying out orders below can also be prosecuted, but it tends to be prosecutions look for those who are the ones who lead in taking action or failing to take action where there's a criminality. It's about using the International Criminal Court that sits in The Hague. So what we already have there, the ICC was put in place back in 1998. They already take the cases for international crimes of genocide, war crimes, crimes of aggression, and crimes against humanity. So it's expanding their remit. The governing document that put the ICC in place is called the Rome Statute. So it's just an amendment to that document that's required. Now, how it works is there are 123 countries that are signatories to the Rome Statute. So not all countries in the world are signatories. All of those that are signatories are bound by that statute. So with Ecocide being added to it, an amendment to it, then they're all bound by it. It doesn't mean they all have to sign up to it. In fact, all it needs is a 2/3 majority, which is 83 people actually in the world, to sign off on this, and then it's binding on all of those 122 states. Now, what about those other states that aren't signatories? America's not a signatory. What happens there? Well, what happens is it marginalizes America's activities. If America wants to continue on with its ecocides, a lot of its transnational corporations will discover very quickly that the safest place to do that will probably be just back at home, because as soon as they step out of the country into a state that is a signatory state, they can be prosecuted. So either you actually shift and move with the new rules of the game, or you become a marginalized country. Now, given that America is a global player, and this is all about financial investment, to continue with the financial investment, you'll find that actually you'll want to change your business activities to ensure that you remain a global player. So although I don't think America will be a leader in this, they will be a follower. But what is very interesting is that once this gets tabled, actually everything starts shifting then. It doesn't wait until the law is finally in place, because you'll find that the flow of investment moves far faster. If you are some Wall Street investor or fund manager, for instance, and suddenly you see that this law is looming, you know what? Investment in fossil fuels suddenly becomes a really dangerous industrial activity. You're going to lose a lot of money out of something that's going to be a criminal activity in 5 years' time, or how many years' time. And so you suddenly start pooling your money, and suddenly the really safe investment becomes, for instance, instead of fossil fuel, renewables.
So on that same note, you have a book called you have several books, but you have a good book called Earth is Our Business. And I'm wondering how you feel, because Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, says that capitalism is the problem. It's not so much climate change as capitalism that has caused climate change, that perpetuates climate change. How do you feel, in terms of what you just spoke about, that investment can push this sort of change? How do you feel that capitalism and environmental safety could coincide, or do you?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with Naomi Klein. I just go one step deeper than that. What's created capitalism? Law. What are the rules of the game? What are the rules of the game of capitalism as we know it? Well, it is the law for a CEO and his directors to put the interests of the shareholder first, which is to maximize profit. So you have a huge problem here. It's a cognitive dissonance. To sit there in a boardroom and actually say, hey, I really don't like this. This is going to cause a lot of harm, and people are going to be displaced, and the land's going to be destroyed, and the water is going to be polluted. Well, the lawyer at the table, which could be me, would say, tough. It's a crime. It's not a crime. And just remember, your number one legal duty is the interest of the shareholders about maximizing profit. So don't get too ethical on this one. So we have a problem. Our law is out of step with our understanding of what is going on. And our laws that govern capitalism is at a breaking point, if you like. And so this is about how laws become hugely out of kilter. The scales of justice are out of kilter, if you like, and how ecocide law readdresses that, because ecocide law is about criminal law. It's about making it a crime so that individuals are held to account for their decisions, those human beings in those companies, not the company. It's not saying this is the criminal, because that's just a piece of paper. It's saying that, and this is the principle that was put in place during the Nuremberg war tribunals, it's human beings who commit crimes. And that's hugely, hugely important.
So I'm curious, what is your opinion on, because there was a recent article that excuse me, that just came out discussing how India had a huge solar panel project planned that was knocked down because of trade tribunals. And the TPP, for example, or TTIP or things like that, would create these sovereign tribunals that are outside any government. How
Yeah.
would that affect an ecocide law?
Yeah, so again, this is about the hierarchy of law. Where does that sit within that framework? You've got international criminal law at the top, bilateral treaties, multilateral treaties, transatlantic trade partnerships. They all come below. Yeah, so they're overridden by international criminal law, and that's hugely, hugely important, because what ecocide law does is it renders TTIP toothless. And that's very, very important. And not just TTIP or any other transatlantic treaty that's being put in place at the moment, or bilateral treaties that are used often with these small island developing states in America, for instance. It overrides all of that, and that's recognized in law as being what's called the conflict of laws. What takes superior hierarchy in the hierarchy of law?
I think sometimes people hear about, like the hierarchy of law, like international law, that seems so big, it seems so far beyond me and what I can do. And I know that that you have a book that talks about this as well, your personal evolution and how that is necessary to provide this national evolution or this international evolution. Talk a little bit about how that, even when with you, who's somebody who deals with this international law and these big ideas, how can somebody on a very localized level start shifting those paradigms and shifting their own evolution?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because this is in part my journey as well. Once you start looking at big international law to turn around kind of a sinking ship, and you realize that, there's ecocide happening all over the frigging place. In every country, everywhere I go, I'm thinking, okay, what's the ecocide here? And lo and behold, I discover it. And I began to think, well, what about our inner ecocides? What are those patterns of harm that play out in our lives that we repeat and we repeat, that actually, cause harm to us at a kind of mental and, dare I say it, spiritual level? and that have their own collateral damage that actually creates disharmony within my relationship, within my community. And it made me realize that actually global governance and self-governance, they run on the same lines. And it's that whole thing of actually understanding where our own boundaries are so that we don't remain complicit within a system of harm, both internally as well as externally.
Right. And like you said, when you start to understand that you're not going to take it, so to speak, on an internal level, that automatically goes outward, and you start noticing it about everything from the air to the water to, social justice and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And you know what? It's really not rocket science. It's only lawyers who make law complicated. In truth, it's not. You can ask yourself a few key fundamental questions. Whose interests are being protected here by any given law? And is it polluter or is it people and planet? And if it's the polluter, the destroyer, the big transnational corporation that's causing harm, there's something wrong there. That can't be right, ultimately, at the end of the day. And by the way, this is the other thing. Law doesn't have to take lots of time to put in place. Every country in the world can pass emergency legislation overnight. So, it doesn't have to go through long, convoluted processes. George Bush, he shored up Wall Street at 3 o'clock in the morning. We passed terrorist legislation at 3 o'clock in the morning. Not that that was our best laws, but, but this is the thing. Emergency, when we do decide this is a climate emergency, then we can put in place emergency laws. And an emergency is just a state of emergence. It's an opportunity for something new to emerge. It's not something to be scared of. It's something to welcome in, actually. So, I say welcome in the emergency. Normal rules don't apply then.
To learn more about Polly, visit pollyhiggins.com. And that, revolutionaries, does it for this windy week's Dose of Dissent. Thank you so much for watching. Please spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. As usual, check out the last slide to see all the sites that I mentioned in this week's show. And be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. From the Devil's Den, good night and act out. And real quick, to keep independent, non-corporatized media like this show going, donate at Occupy.com/donate. If you'd like to donate directly to Act Out, visit Patreon.com/actout.